I embraced it. I worked hard. I believed in myself. And then I won the Olympic trials in 2012. And then I was kicked off the Olympic team for not filling out paperwork.
It was paperwork, not ability or performance, but simply paperwork that put you out. So
Paperwork.
how depressing, how depressing is that?
It was heartbreaking. So for your listeners, I qualified for Olympic trials, and once you become an Olympian, you sign a contract. And I travel 300 days a year with boxing. I left the country to fight in the World Championships, a tournament you get drug tested to fight in. And they showed up to my home in Kansas City to give me a random drug test, and I wasn't there. A missed drug test is a positive drug test. I was suspended for a positive drug test. This has never been an actual offense.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people from around the world, you say, okay, we know where Canada is. In British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And then on the west coast, they have this province, British Columbia, has this big city called Vancouver. Right. We are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers, which puts us in the center of British Columbia, north, south, east, and west. And we live in a region that has lots of timber, lots of nature, and lots of animals around us that are part of nature. Black bears, grizzly bears, mooses, caribou, deer, you name it, we have it all here. So I call it paradise. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Cam Awesome. Cam is a 12-time national boxing champion, heavyweight by the way, three times Olympic trials champion, and a former captain of the U.S. national boxing team. It's going to be a very, very interesting podcast. Cam, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm an open book. I'll answer all questions, but I also have questions about you. You're a very interesting dude, man.
I like that. So, Kim, that being said, you are an amazing sports individual and you have an amazing record, but I know that also part of what shaped you is you went through some very difficult times, including being bullied, that changed and affected your life at different times. And then the other part, and I can relate to it, although I was not a boxer, but I can relate to the challenges of going down and ending up with saying he'll never make it, he'll never be successful, and blah, 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 and all the negative. And to then find ways of how do I get back out? And I always believed in me. But it took me a long time to get there.
Oh, I could spend an hour talking about belief in self and how it's society doesn't allow you to believe in yourself, and they make it hard for you to believe in yourself. And culture and society have made it in a way that if you do believe in yourself, you're not as likable.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have theories behind it.
Yeah, so tell us, what was your journey, in particular when you grew up, and then the
Okay.
bullying, and so how did it go from there on in, and gradually then worked into sports, obviously was part of who you are. And the other part I'm kind of excited about, so many things for you to talk about, is that we have something else in common. I love interacting with people, although not always. I became a public speaker, in-demand speaker, at a later age until I had confidence. And so I love to do presentations. I'm an in-demand speaker, and also that part changed my life.
Sweet. Well, I'll start from the very beginning, and yeah, we do have a lot in common, and I would like for us to have more in common the older I get, because I'm trying to be where you are, as active as you are, and as dedicated you are at 84. So to kind of start off my story, when I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, and I dealt with bullying. I wasn't a tough kid. you hear these stories where people share, like, when I was growing up, I would fight everyone. I was tough. I didn't care. I wasn't that guy. And it's so easy to talk about those. Isn't it funny how no man has ever lost a fight when he was younger? Everyone talks about all the butt they kicked and how tough they were. There were no punks back in the day because I was one of those punk kids. Like, I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to have a good time and play video games. And there's a bully down the block from me that he saw that I was weak and he saw that I was a easy target. He'd beat me up every time. He saw me in third grade. He slammed my head into a brick wall and I was sent to the hospital with a concussion. And my school's solution, because he was in the class with me, was to release me 10 minutes early from school. So school's over at 3. I got out at 2:50 so I could get home before my bully got to me. And it became saying ever since I was young, I was avoiding confrontation and running away from fights. And I didn't know what anxiety was. And I'm grateful that I didn't know, because if I knew what anxiety was, I would have avoided things that made me anxious. Right. And I'm grateful I never avoided those things. In the nurses in middle school, I would volunteer in the nurse's office because I was afraid to be in the lunchroom around all those people because I was afraid a fight would happen. And it never did happen until my first week of high school. In 9th grade, I lost my first fight. And in my defense, she was very strong. It was a girl. So I got beat up by a girl in 9th grade. And I decided, this is a big pivot in my life, because I decided, okay, I got beat up by a girl. Granted, I didn't really get beat up by a girl. I like to say that because it's funny, but a girl beat me up and there's nothing I could do back because you can't hit a girl. No. And I decided I didn't want to be a victim anymore, and I didn't want people to feel like I was someone you could pick on. So my plan was
you? Why did they want to pick on you? Because already then you now are about 6'3". You're a big guy.
It doesn't matter how big you are. It's how willing how much you're willing to deal with confrontation. So I joined the boxing gym because I thought if I looked like a big buff boxer, people would leave me alone. Yeah. And here's the thing I learned: once you know how to fight, you don't have to.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So I went to the boxing gym. The plan was to look like a boxer, and I went to the gym every day. The coach knew I wasn't there to fight. He knew I just wanted to do the fitness class and work out. So he didn't pay me any mind.
How old were you
16.
when you started going to the gym?
I was 16 when I started going to the gym. I tried out for every team. I've never made any teams. I'm not very athletic at this point. But my brain works in a weird way where I understand systems. And so I went to the boxing gym every day to lose the weight. And after I lost all the weight, my coach said, "Cam, you're in better shape than all the other boxers. I think it's time for you to get in the ring and spar." And I said, "Oh, no, thank you. I don't think my mom is going to let me." And everyone laughed. And I was like, I'm joking. I'll get a mouthpiece. And I was because I'm non-confrontational. I don't like confrontation. I just wanted to join boxing so people leave me alone. And now the next day I'm in the ring with my mouthpiece. I'm getting ready to spar. And bro, I'm so afraid that I decide I was just going to run from my opponent the entire sparring session. And that's what I did. And I felt like I burned so many calories in sparring because I was doing so much moving around that I burned more calories in sparring than I did everything else. So I got addicted to sparring. And this is where I found out where it's valuable to be a part of a team. Because once everyone liked sparring me, because I was a big body, I didn't hit hard, I moved around a lot, so I was great to be in the ring with. I sparred everyone in the gym, no matter how big, how small, it's all I did. And I was afraid to miss the gym, because what if I missed the gym and someone showed up to spar me that day? Yeah. That accountability made me feel like I was part of the team, and it made me show up. Yeah. And I realized what boxing was. If you hit me, you get a point. If I hit you, I get a point. John, if you don't hit me, you can't win. No. And once I figured that out, I was like, okay, that's going to be my approach to boxing. Once I figured out that equation, if you don't hit me, you can't win. Yeah. I was like, oh, I could become the best boxer in the world. I went from never making a team to within 2 months, I was like, oh, this is not that hard. So the first thing I started to do is I started to interview the judges and referees. And I asked them, well, what are you looking for? Exactly. And they said, well, we're looking for clean shots that snap an opponent's head back. Yeah. So I said, well, I'm not throwing any big, hard punches. I'm only throwing light snapping punches that snap someone's head back. Yeah. And it's so much less exhausting to do that. So I decided to fight at super heavyweight, the biggest weight class. I'm fighting guys who are like 300 pounds. It's anything over 91 kilograms.
Yeah.
And so my plan was I fight these big guys and I run from them until they get tired, and then I score points and win. John, no one likes it. It's boring, but I milked the system. And within 2 years of boxing, I qualified for the 2008 Olympic trials.
So
I never made a team.
2012, or when was that?
No, that was 2008. I qualified for the Olympic trials. I lost.
Yeah.
And everyone, here's what I learned about resilience. Everyone in the tournament that lost either quit or turned pro.
Yeah.
And I thought, if everyone lost, quit, or turned pro, and I don't, aren't I automatically the best?
Yeah.
You see, in life, a lot of times when we fall short or we fail, that's when we want to give up. But that's when you're in a better position to succeed because you have experience on your side.
Exactly.
So I decided I was going to keep boxing. I ended up winning nationals the following year, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011. I won nationals every year. I was captain of the USA national boxing team. And I went from this person who was unconfident and getting bullied to a seemingly cocky person. And John, I want to tell you how I figured it out. Do you remember iPods back in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have one. And I always wanted one. So my boxing gym was 6 miles away from my high school. So every day after school, I had to walk 6 miles. It took me about 3 hours. And because I didn't have music, I would make up stories in my head. And in my stories, John, I was badass. I was knocking everyone out. I had all the money, all the cars, all the jewelry, all the championship belts. John, none of this was true.
No.
But I saw a correlation between how highly I spoke about myself and how well I did in the gym the next day.
Yeah.
And that gave me a confidence. And I realized what I was doing is I was telling myself how amazing I was all the time.
Right.
When I started this by saying we were taught not to believe in ourselves.
Right.
And here's why I changed that. Every day I walked to the gym talking about how amazing I was. And John, the pendulum swung. I went from being this unconfident, chubby kid getting beat up in school and avoiding bullies to I was cocky, I was arrogant, and I was the number one boxer in the country within a year. And I embraced it. I worked hard. I believed in myself. And then I won the Olympic trials in 2012. And then I was kicked off the Olympic team for not filling out paperwork.
It was paperwork, not ability or performance, but simply paperwork that put you out. So
Paperwork.
How depressing is that?
It was heartbreaking. So for your listeners, I qualified for Olympic trials, and once you become an Olympian, you sign a contract, and I travel 300 days a year with boxing. I left the country to fight in the World Championships, a tournament you get drug tested to fight in. And they showed up to my home in Kansas City to give me a random drug test, and I wasn't there. A missed drug test is a positive drug test. I was suspended for a positive drug test. This has never been an actual offense, but it was a few months after Lance Armstrong went on Oprah. Yeah. And they made an example out of a bunch of athletes for silly infractions. Yeah. I was one of them. You ever screw up so bad and you're like, you think, is there anyone else I could pin this on? Yeah. Or is there someone I could blame? Because honestly, when I felt like I lost everything I'd ever worked for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there was absolutely nothing that you could have done about it, because if they do a random drug test and they visit your home, and if it is one that is not announced and you fail if you're not there, that doesn't make sense, does it?
It doesn't make sense. So this is, and here's something I could have done. I could have emailed them that I was leaving the country. That was my responsibility. Right. But it wasn't you're supposed to let them know where you're going to be at all times. So let's say, as an athlete, let's say I go to a training camp in Canada and I leave let's say I go to my own city. Let's say I'm in Kansas City. I go to the swimming pool and I don't have my phone on me in the swimming pool, and they show up to my house and call my phone and I'm not there. It was a silly process. It was an outdated process. And after my suspension, I returned to boxing and I became the athlete rep on the United States Anti-Doping Agency's organization to speak on behalf of the athletes, because it wasn't a fair system.
That doesn't
and we've now
exist
taken
anymore.
steps to change that. doesn't exist anymore, but it did, and I was affected heavily by it.
So now the other part, if I introduce you, is saying, where does the name awesome come from?
Oh, let me explain. So, walking to the gym every day for 3 hours, I was talking highly of myself. But after my suspension, I couldn't box for a year, and during my year off, I was depressed. I was drinking a lot. I was eating crappy food, and when it was time for me to return to boxing, I had to lose my weight, and I couldn't get myself to lose the weight. And I'd work out for a few days, John, and I would fall off, and I'd work out for a few days, and I'd fall off. And then one day, and I don't know how often you do this, but I was really giving it to myself. I was like, you fat loser, you piece of shit. Like I was, and in that moment, I had a thought. I was like, oh, there's a difference between me in 2012 and me that was walking to the gym in high school. One of us liked me. And this is where I found the importance of your internal dialogue and the idea of self-belief. One of the number one comments, because ESPN did an article on it, and one of the number one comments was, I bet he's humble now. I bet he's humble now. Because I wasn't humble. I was cocky. I believed in myself. And then I looked up the definition of humility. John, have you ever done this?
No.
The definition is having or showing a low or modest estimate of one's own importance. A second definition is to lower someone in dignity or respect. The truth is, the Latin root word for humble or humility is humilis, which means lowly. John, you can't tell someone to reach for the stars if you're telling them they have to remain lowly.
Yeah.
And I saw a problem with this. I was like, oh, I need to believe in myself because self-belief is the fuel for our machine, which we call our human body. And I said, you know what? Screw this. I'll never be humble again. I went out and I legally changed my last name to Awesome as a reminder to believe in myself.
Right.
That's why I did it. I don't believe in being humble. I think it's a hurtful virtue. If you're of a religious background, sure, you can believe that if you'd like in a religious aspect, but in a literal aspect of everyday life, I don't believe humility is a positive virtue.
So, with all the success that you had, and all the things that you did, and all the things, and then going down and reaching kind of bottom in a way, that how do you get motivated there? Then the question becomes, as I said earlier, and I experienced, who am I? And it took me probably 50 years to get there until I was probably 60 or 62, because I was affected by a number of things. And if I just share a little bit with you, is that I was born in 1940 in northeastern part of Holland. That was at the beginning of the Second World War. That my mom and dad were married in 1938, and they were in love. My dad had a job. They rented a house. They were the happiest people in the world. And then fairly quickly had two children, a boy and a girl. And then my mom was pregnant with me in 1940. And then the dictator called Adolf Hitler started invading Poland and the rest of the world. And the dictator then decided to take over Western Europe. And my dad then was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940. And for 5 years, they didn't know if he died or survived the bombing of Rotterdam, because that's the last place that they saw him. And thousands of people died. And the first thing that I remember as a kid when I was about 3.5, 4 years old is hundreds of bombers of the Allied forces bombing the infrastructure, the war infrastructure of Germany and the northwestern part of Germany that touches on the North Sea. And we lived 10 minutes from the border. And my mom used to take us at nights outside. I still can hear, Cam, the sound of hundreds of bombers overhead. And the reason my mom took us outside was because she felt safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we could see cities burning. Bremen, Wilhelmshaven, Hamburg, Kiel, all those in the distance, the sky was red. And so there was fear and anxiety. And then the next thing that I remember is that 2004, they cut off all the food supply to Holland and other places. And I remember I was then 3.5, 4 years old, and so between my brother, my sister, and myself, every morning we would go with gunny sacks into the railroad yards, pick up anything edible and burnable. And so the reason that we did is because the Germans wouldn't shoot us, they boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. And then from that point forward, I remember Holland being, it was then the Allied forces had landed in Normandy, the Canadians made their way through France, Belgium, Holland, the west side of Holland, it pushed the Germans through the north part, and on April the 12th, 1945, we were in our part of Holland, liberated by the Canadian Army. It made such an impression on me that I knew from that point forward, I would, as I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. I was going to go when I was 17, was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years, and then went to Canada when I was 23.
Man, so how do you feel when someone tells you they have a hard day? Man, the stuff you've been through.
I say, you live in paradise, and be in North America, it's paradise. And the other thing that's important to me is that my foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic. And then if you combine all of those, what follows is success.
I love that. I love that. Man, that's a pretty crazy story. That really puts some perspective on life.
So the other part that I touched on before with you that was interesting from who am I is that from the war years, I still, even now, still have effects of PTSD, the inner child, and I in fact got counseling for that when I was 50s, the fear of losing that one parent that we had because my dad, we didn't know if he was dead or alive, the fear of losing her called the inner child that I dealt with. Got counseling for that in my 50s, very emotional. And so the important thing became then that academically I was not a success story. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And some people said, well, send him to the mentally challenged school. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. So I was 12 and a half years old, and they said, we'll get him a job and become a professional in something. And so they sent me to a furniture factory, and then I worked in the furniture factory at 12 and a half, and then at nights I would go become a furniture maker. And I knew then already I was just as good as any of the other guys, but kids can be very, as you know from your experience, very hard on each other. So when I left grade 7 for the third time, it was called a dummy, and he never knows anything, he never amount to anything, blah, 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 is that I became a laborer where my friends then went to college and university. I became a laborer. I'm proud of that now, but then it was kind of looked down on. But subsequently, I always looked at myself. I knew I was just as smart as any of the other ones, and I could be just as successful. And even then already, I had positive attitude, passion, and work ethic, but I didn't know how to put it together. And I lived in my own world, knowing that I could do it. So going to Canada, it then became, for me, a question. Start with nothing. Start over from new. I took a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, very little money, flew into Montreal, took the train because I wanted to build a lumber mill. That was my other dream. Prove to me that I could do it, starting with nothing. Took the train from Montreal to Vancouver, 4 days, 5 nights. God, that is a long way. Anyway, I came to Vancouver, went to the immigration office, couldn't speak English, but fortunately there was a German fellow, I could speak some German. I told him I want to build a lumber mill. And he said, go to Prince George. That's where I am now, 60 years later. I can still see where the Greyhound station was here. I came off the bus with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times, and I had the dream to build a lumber mill. I had $25.47, and as I said, but I had lots of attitude, passion, work ethic, and but we said
Those are free.
and those are free. And that's again, but it took me, that was when I arrived there, July of 1965. But it took me until I was already successful. Yes, I did build a lumber mill. I did a lot of other things, and everybody said, "Oh my God, you're so successful." I didn't feel that way. And it was not until in 1997, January 1997, I went into a bookstore here in Prince George, picked up a book, Driven to Distraction. And I still don't know why. This is the actual book, and I still don't know why I picked it up. And the book was about ADHD. And I opened the book and I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And so I wrote in the book, this is the actual book, January 1997, now in Dutch, "Now I finally know who I am." And so, and the reason that I wrote it in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. Because it was implied that you had a mental deficiency. And the more I found out about it, the more I became convinced that it is a superpower. And so, but it took me, from the time that I bought the book, it took me 5 years, 1997 till 2002, until I went to my doc 5 years later. And the doc delivered our 2 daughters and was a personal friend. And he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we concluded, yeah, I do. And so the more I read about it, the more I saw about it. Now, can you imagine this? I left school at 12 and a half years old, became a laborer, and it took me till I was 62, 50 years later, until I knew that me was ADHD. And to then understand it, that it's not a deficiency or a disorder, in my opinion, it's a superpower. And today, when I have a number of companies, it's not about my success, but I have probably 10 different companies. I write books, I have about 6 of them. I'm like you, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and do all of those things. But it took me 50 years that I knew.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because you are, first of all, you're amazing. Your story's amazing. Your resilience is amazing. I appreciate our conversation. But what I find from people, especially not from the United States, I'm the child of 2 immigrants who, their country, they left. My dad left Trinidad. He had dirt floors. He came to America, and that, knowing where he came from and how bad it is other places, you're not going to outwork someone like that in America.
No.
Like the people who were born here and raised here. Now I have that immigrant mentality burnt into me, that work ethic. And there are things that my parents didn't accept because they understand what a struggle is. So usually the people with those immigrant mentalities and that work ethic and the rub dirt in it, you're bleeding, so rub dirt in it, keep it moving. Those people don't normally accept things like ADHD. They say, "Oh, those are excuses." So do you think you would have been successful as you are today if back then you would have known what ADHD is and you would have been told, because it does look like a disability or a crutch. Do you think you would have been where you are today if you knew what you had back then?
That's a very interesting question, Cam. I knew I was different. I didn't know why or what, but the interesting part about it, even when I failed grade 3 and grade 7, I was very good at numbers, and I have also dyslexia. I was not good at reading, but I was very good at writing. But the 2 alone did not make me successful in this traditional learning cycle. And so I was failed grade 7, and then they said mentally challenged. And I had to then kind of deal with that. How come I'm different than all the others? And then even to the point that I want to work with my little coveralls. I was a small guy for 12 and a half, so the school came out on Friday. All the kids had a month holiday. Then in Europe, now they have 3 months holiday in the summer. But my dad said, okay, well, my friend has a clothing store. We're going to go to the clothing store on Sunday, and on Monday you have to go to work in the furniture factory. So they had to find 3 sets of coveralls, but they didn't have any small enough, so they rolled them way up here, and the crotch was hanging by my knees. Not very cool then, but it was cool today.
Yeah.
And so, but the point is that the kids that were successful, if you wish, in schooling, want to gather riding on their bikes to school, which was 8, 10, 15 kilometers away, but I was a laborer. I could not be part of that, and so, but I knew I was different than others, and I felt that my going to Canada and setting a goal for me, building my own lumber mill, that would prove to me that I could do it, and I would go back either successful or in the box. A little bit radical, but that's kind of how I looked at it. And so there was no question about it when I stepped off the bus with my $25.47, and not being able to speak the language, not knowing anybody, and not having a job, that starting as a cleanup man, lumber pilot, and on and on and on, I would get to the point of building my own lumber mill. There was no question in my mind about it. But on the other hand, I was different, and I had difficulty interacting. I didn't have the self-confidence, and even when I had to interact with other people, I was not good at that. I could do it at my operations here, maybe have 2 or 3 people, but otherwise I was not a good communicator until 1990, when somebody, my ex-sister-in-law, that said to me, hey John, why don't you go with me to Toastmasters? I said, what's that all about? He said, it's about teaching communication skills. I said, is anybody going to ask me questions? He said, no. So I was there for about half a meeting, and then somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about it. I said, oh, I'll never go back here. But I did. I stayed there for 10 years and became a distinguished Toastmaster. That in combination with being liberated by the Canadian armies, PTSD, if you wish, and a child, taking the decision to leave my country, start with nothing, and then finding the book, but already being successful before that, that changed my life. And then Toastmasters changed my life to where today I'm an author, I'm successful at 10 different companies, do all these other things, and then obviously I'm very active podcasting as well, which is an amazing media. Maybe we talk about that a little bit later as well. But the combination of all of that changed my life. But it took me till the time that I was diagnosed ADHD until I knew, who am I? It took me that long. And then...
What age were you when you found out who you were? Sorry.
60,
which age were you when you found out?
62.
So I'm 36 now. I think it's important for your list because my little sister just turned 30 yesterday, and she's having a meltdown over it. And she's like, oh my God, I'm old. I'm like, no. First of all, you're only as old as your responsibilities and your positioning in life. I know a 16-year-old who just had a baby, and she's older than me because I don't have kids. I don't have that responsibility. I think it's important that people understand that, first of all, I think retirement is a trap.
Just stand by for the second, Cam.
Okay.
My phone is the... Oh, yeah. Can you hear me again?
Yep. Okay, I think retirement is a trap. I think people live their whole life in this. I can't wait to retire. And life is supposed to be a journey, but they black out the entire journey till they get to the end of the journey. Like, I'm retired. And then they sit around, do nothing, and die because they have no purpose in life. I love the fact that you are still out there kicking ass, bro. And to me, that inspires me because I'm not even half of your age. So if I work towards you, living young and dying old, I love your philosophy of life, living young and dying old. That is, you figured it out.
Oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. and saying that's me today, and I say the reason that I wrote the book, because I say age is just a number. It's not just a number. It's quality of
I'll catch you a
life that is
charge.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's important.
yeah. So, and a lot of people say to me, "How do you do all the things that you're doing at 84?" I said, "ADHD. That's how I do it." So
Yeah.
so it brings us back to the question, likely that you asked earlier, is that if you would have known that you had ADHD, would it have changed your life? I don't think so, because it is only recently that ADHD is slowly being more accepted around the world as something that is not a liability, but in a lot of cases could be an asset. When I grew up, even failing grade 3 and not being very good at listening, if you wish, reading, would be looked at as dumb and probably mentally challenged. And I think it took a long time until I wrote that book recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, very popular actually, and wherever the opportunity presents itself, I speak about ADHD as something that is not a liability, but can in a lot of cases become an asset once you understand it. And then the amazing thing, that's why I mentioned to you earlier that this book, driven by Dr. Halliwell wrote 18 books, ADHD, and has dyslexia, so do I. Very popular speaker around the world. And, so that when I read this book, that it became more obvious to me that not enough people fully understand it. And the likelihood is, if somebody wanted to see my podcast with Dr. Halliwell, that we did my podcast number 203, your number 371. Very interesting podcast, because I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, he's the expert, and I lived it, is saying that I believe that the frequency of occurrence of ADHD in the population in general, male and female, although females projected different than males, is probably 20%. He said, no, John, it's more than 25%. I agree with them. The other thing that I said, over my years, I've been very involved in business, very involved in companies, on board of directors, doing all this stuff. Met a lot of successful people. I suggested to Dr. Halliwell that I believe of the successful, and the operative is successful entrepreneurs, I believe 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with him. And so the conclusion is that somewhere between 25 and 30% of the population globally, ADHD. And so the stigma around it is gradually, slowly improving. And as you do, I've seen some of your presentations, and you do like I do. I always say I'm not a good reader in terms of, obviously I have dyslexia. And so, but nobody, once I do a presentation, nobody will forget me. Because I'm usually mobile like you are. You're a dancer. You move around. and that's what I do. I have to be in touch with you. And so then by the time I give a presentation, and I'm good at that, and as you are, and then so sometimes what I do during this presentation is saying, anybody here that has ADHD, and some of the ones that believe they have, and all kinds of fingers go up. And then by the time I'm done with my presentation, that does not always, a segment of it may be ADHD, the rest may be entrepreneurship or God knows what. By the time I'm done, a lot of people sitting in the room, they say, damn, I wish I had it too.
I love that. I love that. You have good stage presence, I can tell.
Yeah, I love it.
You're very passionate about what you speak about.
And that's the key, right? And that's what made you successful. That's why you're a presenter of what you do. And And in a way, it made you successful also as a boxer, in my opinion, is that you know the game, if you wish. You know, you understand how they judge and what they do. You understand your opponent, and it's a mental process. So what most of the people do that are boxers, that once the pause comes, they sit down in the corner, but you don't do that. You stand up and walk around and you say, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, it's a lot. Even so, boxing is the greatest metaphor for life because we're all fighting our own battles. And one of the things I realized in boxing was most people most people are looking for a reason to be mentally weak. So if you and I are fighting, my goal is to get in your head. I don't even need to physically beat you. First, I mentally beat you. We're fighting. The most popular punch a person throws is a jab. One of the things I do, if you throw a jab at me, I slip, uppercut. You throw a jab, I slip, I uppercut. The third time you throw your jab, I slip, you close your eyes because you know uppercut's coming. And I just look at you. So when you open your eyes, you know that every time you throw your favorite punch, you get hit with an uppercut.
Yeah.
You stop throwing that punch. And the second you go to throw it and you flinch, I smile at you because I know that you can't throw that punch anymore. And I'm already in your head. So now you start throwing your right hand. And once I do that to your right hand, you're confused. If you ever seen a boxing match and you're like, you trained this long, why aren't you throwing any punches?
Yeah.
Because I psychologically conditioned him not to.
Yeah.
No one sees that from the outside, but these are little games. And what I need you to do is I need you to question yourself. Just leave a window to question yourself, to think, is Cam better than me? And if you just leave that window in, I'll smile so you know I'm better than you. And I just want to plant that seed that you're not good enough. I'm a better fighter than you. I'm a better person than you. I'm a better father than you. I don't even have kids. I'm a better lover. I do taxes better. Every aspect of your life, I am better than you because the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
And that's the point. That's what life is all about and being successful in particular.
Yeah. I do get a little, I am very competitive. Yeah.
So am
I. Don't invite me to game night. I want to play Monopoly, not to win. I want to win, but the whole time I'm winning, it's not, I don't care about winning. I just want to remind you that I'm better than you and you're not winning. No one likes game night with Cam. I'm trying to crush souls.
So Cam, so you're now 36. You're in, I believe, Austin, Texas. And so you still look very fit. So you are, and I believe it was in your bio, you're retired, kind of retired, semi-retired. So what are you? Are you still boxing at some point earlier than a lot of other sports? You go to a different level, but still it's obviously a very, very important part of your life, the way you live and the success you had because of it. But you're very fit now. So does boxing still play a role in some form of fashion? And what else are you doing other than being a professional presenter and some of the other things?
Oh, well, first thing with boxing, don't like it, not a fan of boxing. But I understood it was something that I needed to do to get where I wanted to be in life. I understand the concept of athlete privilege. Like if you think back in school, let's say that there's a super athlete in your school, the best athlete. He could be bad at school, he could cause trouble, but they won't suspend him because we have a game that night.
Yeah.
He gets special privileges because he's an athlete.
Yeah.
That happens in college and that happens in real life as well. And I understood so after I won my first national championship. So John, let's say you have an associate's degree and I have a national championship and we apply for a marketing job. Who do you think's going to get it?
You.
The guy with the national championship.
Yeah, no question.
Let's say you have a 4-year degree. You have a 4-year bachelor's degree, and I have 4 national championships, and we apply for the job. Who do you think is going to get it?
You're going to get it.
So I retired with 12 national championships, and the reason why I never turned pro is I don't like boxing, but I understood that if I put in the work and I front loaded the beginning of my life with hard work and boxing, the rest of my life is relatively easy.
That
because I've
became
done
the
everything I need to do.
Then. That's the foundation piece, right?
Yeah, it's a foundation. And the thing is, I don't like boxing.
No.
And I say that so people could know I don't care if you like it or not. If it's something you need to get done to get to where you want to get to in life, no one cares about your feelings. Bro, I will tell you, like the world didn't care that Hitler was invading. Like your parents just had to figure things out. And in life, you just have to keep it going. And I love that. I don't love that you've experienced that, but the lessons that you took from it and how resilient your mother had to be of figuring things out and being resourceful. And you, that was instilled in you. You came to America with $25.47. Like, and you've built the empire that you have, and you have all these businesses. And it's because one, you believe in yourself, and two, you probably realize no one cares if you're successful or not. Only it's up to you.
In fact, just the opposite. A lot of times, nobody likes that I'm successful.
Oh,
That has to be a reason for it. People say, "Oh, you've been lucky." I said, "Well, that's not how it works. You know, the harder you work, the luckier you get. That's how it works." You know?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I know that for sure.
Yeah. So what are you doing then now physically? So give us an idea about, you do a lot of presenting, and obviously, are you still involved in sports? And what are the other things that you're doing?
So I do a lot of presenting, and I have a belief, and I believe you believe the same thing because you understand the hard work and physical condition that comes with getting in shape. Your body is your business card.
Yeah.
And it's very controversial, but when someone looks at you, they see the level of discipline you have within your life.
Yeah.
And I can't get on stages speaking about resilience and discipline if I'm not in great physical conditioning. So although I wasn't because in boxing, I figured out the scoring system. I didn't have to be big and strong looking to win. I was a chubby boxer. I was at 36% body fat,
Right.
and winning national championships. But I understand that's how I could behave as a boxer. As someone who speaks about being a boxer, I have to look the part. So I had to change my discipline. I had to start eating healthier. I had to start working out, even though I'm working out harder now that I'm retired than I did when I was boxing.
Yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
now my
to me.
workout's for vanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do that. I present. I speak at a lot of high schools and middle schools. I talk about bullying, self-belief, and the importance of a positive internal dialogue because it's what I needed when I was growing up.
That's what I do.
I speak at corporations. I speak on mindset, resilience, and as well, I was captain of the USA national boxing team for 15 years. Well, closer to 13 years. And I would travel around the world as number one boxer in the country. We would go to other countries, like we'd go to Ukraine and we'd fight the number one boxers in Ukraine. So my job as captain was to find the do's and don'ts about each culture, relay the message to my teammates so we don't look like idiots in other countries. So I learned a lot about cultural communication. So I also speak about cultural communication within the workplace. So I've built a kind of successful, I've built a successful speaking business for myself in the youth and the corporate world. And I also do stand-up comedy. So that's
the interesting part, Cam, that I notice with you is that you're a very good presenter, but what that requires is that, from my experience and what I've seen, is you have to have confidence in who you are. And so that's what I say to a lot of people is that, and it took me a long time to get there, is that believe in who you are. Don't get preoccupied. So many times that when I present to younger people, high schools, colleges, and all the same groups that you do, is say, don't get preoccupied of what you're wearing, this, that. There is only one of you. Realize that there is only one of you in this whole world. Accept who you are, and then the next thing, be at peace with who you are. And so it took me a long time to get there, and then to become a presenter. Although I had the ability, I have a very good memory, kind of compensating for dyslexia, maybe, I don't know, and so I'm very good at numbers. That makes me good in business, especially when it has a S and two lines in it in front of it.
Big fan of those.
Yeah. So, but how did you get there? So the confidence you build, but to become a very good presenter as you are, how did you get there?
I figured it out through how I found success in boxing. So, John, if let's say we're the same age and weight, and you have 100 boxing matches, and I have 3 boxing matches, and we were to fight, who do you think will win?
The one with the 100.
Now, John, I didn't tell you what your record was. You could be 20 wins and 80 losses. The idea is it's not your record, it's the experience you have on your side. And experience translates to skill and comfortability. And once I had 300 boxing matches, after my 100 boxing matches, all my other boxing matches was relatively easy because I was comfortable. I realized when I got on stages, if I spoke more than other speakers, I would be better than all the other speakers because I'm more experienced. If something goes wrong, I know how to fix it. I know my speech back and front. I can do it blindfolded with or without slides. Consistency. John, you're not outworking me. Well, maybe you might outwork me, but the average person,
No.
not outworking this guy.
No.
John's a little different. Yeah.
No, but we think the same, Cam, and that's exactly what
Real
I
recognize
do.
real, John. You look familiar.
So the other part about it, as we approach the end of our show here, is I want to talk to you about, like it took me I love podcasting, and I started about 5-6 years ago on the local level, doing blogging, interacting, then started working with a local television station and using mainly local regional people, and we have a lot of them here interviewing person to person in live. And then COVID came. And we couldn't do that anymore. And so then saying, what are we going to do now? And then I had this apartment and saying, well, maybe what we should do is, I was watching all the major television stations, CNN, ABC, and all the other ones that you know. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4 different people from all kinds of parts of the world interacting with the host and saying, well, maybe what we should do is do it virtual. And then we started doing that, developing this as a studio, and then started doing virtual podcasting probably 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, somewhere in that area. And then the key again, finding guests. And so PodMatch was the vehicle that we are using now. And we are finding guests from around the world. And in our case, you are 371 where I'm hosting, and I've done another 200 some odd where I'm guesting. And so I love it. And it's on all kinds of different topics. I never know what is going to happen next. And I love that part for all the reasons that you said when you do presenting, because I've seen it all, I've done it all. And if there are challenges, whatever happens, we can deal with. And, so that makes me more successful. But I love it. And then the other part, Cam, is, as I believe you would agree, it's only on its infancy as we speak. And we are podcasting around the world, around the globe, on all kinds of different topics. And it is an amazing vehicle. So the next thing that we want to do is go to a platform that I'm thinking about now. We probably will start in the next 3 to 4 months or so. But in the meantime, being very, very active and consistent, the same as I do with presenting, then it has attracted more other successful podcasters, and then YouTube and all the other vehicles. It's amazing.
Yeah, technology is amazing, and I love that you're utilizing it in a great way, man. I enjoyed our conversation, connecting with you, and we're gonna stay connected.
Yeah, let's do that, Cam. And thanks again for being part of my podcast. Wishing you luck. I'm going to keep watching you, but let's stay in touch.
Let's do. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Cam. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.